Um, what if the school assemblies designed to, scare kids away from substances actually did, well, nothing at all? Welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
So for you listening, we've all been there, right? Sitting on those painfully hard wooden bleachers in a gymnasium.
Oh, yeah, the classic bleachers.
Right, while some speaker at a microphone tries to, terrify a room full of teenagers into permanent sobriety.
It's almost a rite of passage at this point.
It really is. But today, we're looking at a stack of recent literature for you, anchored by a massive 2023 systematic review by researchers Farid, Chelleck, and Yamor, Ulasoy. And it suggests we've spent decades trying to solve the teenage substance crisis by, well, talking to the wrong people.
We absolutely have. The data overwhelmingly demands a pivot in our target audience.
So our mission today is to uncover why those traditional student-only interventions fall flat and why the data strongly points to a surprising secret ingredient for effective prevention.
And that ingredient is parents. We're watching the whole field shift from a student-only educational model to a family-inclusive psychological and environmental model.
Right.
But, to grasp why that shift is so critical, we first have to examine the unique biological landscape of adolescence itself. I mean, you can't design a solution without thoroughly understanding the specific vulnerabilities of the demographic you're trying to protect.
Yeah, that brings us straight to the biology of the adolescent brain.
Yeah.
The literature points out that adolescence is this vital developmental period where the desire for excitement naturally and dramatically spikes.
It does. It's biological.
Right, it's a biological imperative, and that consequently increases risk-taking behaviors. I always picture the adolescent brain as like a high-performance sports car.
I love that analogy.
Yeah. You have this massive, powerful engine, which represents the drive for novelty, thrill, peer validation, but the manufacturer hasn't fully installed the brakes yet.
Exactly. The prefrontal cortex?
Right, the part of the brain responsible for impulse control, regulating emotions, long-term planning, it's still under heavy construction.
And that sports car is navigating a remarkably hazardous road right now. The studies we're examining, they aren't merely focused on teenagers taking, experimental sips of beer at a weekend party.
Right, it's way beyond that.
Yeah. The data aggregated here shows the most frequently used substances among adolescents include alcohol, cigarettes, cannabis, NAS, opium, and methamphetamine.
Oh, wow. Opium and meth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're talking about highly addictive, neurologically aggressive chemicals, and they're interacting with the brain that is already wired to prioritize short-term rewards over long-term consequences.
I mean, opium and methamphetamine are not casual substances. The sources detail some severe cascading risks associated with them. This goes far beyond a momentary lapse in judgment, right?
Far beyond.
Because the data shows that opium use in this demographic is a direct known predictor for future heroin use.
Yeah, it's a terrifying pipeline.
And methamphetamine brings its own unique devastation. I mean, it's tied to a significant increase in risky sexual behaviors and severe psychiatric problems.
Right.
The stakes are incredibly high.
Which is exactly why those old gymnasium scare tactics look profoundly inadequate.
Right. Yelling at them doesn't work.
Fear is a remarkably poor educator. I mean, yelling at a teenager not to drive the sports car doesn't give them the skills to handle the vehicle when they inevitably find themselves behind the wheel.
So true.
We're seeing a vital pivot in the foundational educational approach precisely because of these high stakes. Like the Arkey's lab at Stanford Medicine, for instance.
Oh, I was reading about them.
Yeah, they focus on substantive, scientifically accurate lessons. Instead of simply dictating that drugs are bad, they teach the actual biological mechanisms.
So they're actually teaching the science of it to the kids.
Exactly. They explain how different categories of drugs, stimulants versus depressants versus psychedelics, how they physically alter a developing brain and body.
It sounds like they treat the teenagers with a level of intellectual respect.
They do.
Yeah.
And that makes a huge difference.
By teaching the mechanics of physical dependence, the curriculum sort of demystifies the process of addiction. They're teaching students how to recognize problem use in themselves and their peers.
Right. And providing practical emergency skills, like identifying the physical signs of an overdose.
Which is so crucial. But wait, so are we looking at a complete departure from the old abstinence-only mandates?
Yeah.
Like, is it moving entirely in favor of the harm reduction strategies mentioned in those Reach Lab materials?
Yes, harm reduction is absolutely becoming the necessary standard.
Wow.
It acknowledges the pragmatic reality that teenagers will encounter these substances regardless of what a school policy dictates.
Right, because kids are going to be kids.
Exactly. Giving them accurate science-based information empowers them to make healthier choices in the actual moment of temptation. Furthermore, these modern programs emphasize teaching alternative ways to cope with stress, anxiety, and depression.
Because those are the triggers.
Precisely. Those emotional states are frequently the root drivers that push a teenager towards substance use in the first place. You replace the empty mandate of "don't do this" with a robust toolkit for "do this instead."
Okay, so if we have these incredibly sophisticated harm reduction toolkits, and we're teaching kids the actual neuroscience of addiction, why does the Chelleck and Ulasoy systematic review conclude that educating the teenager is still not enough to protect that developing brain?
Well, Chelleck and Ulasoy analyzed a full decade of data. We're talking from 2012 to 2022.
Okay, that's a massive window.
Massive. They looked across multiple databases and examined studies from 6 vastly different countries.
Oh, right. The U.S., Australia, Iran, Taiwan, the Netherlands, and Mexico.
Exactly. And across all those incredibly diverse cultural and educational contexts, the finding was totally uniform.
Which was?
School-based interventions are significantly more effective when they actively involve both adolescents and their parents.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
I struggle to square that finding with basic teenage psychology.
Yeah.
Well, adolescence is biologically driven by individuation, you know? It's the specific time in life when kids need to distance themselves from their parents to form their own identity.
That's true.
So, I mean, if my school brought my mom and dad into a drug prevention program when I was 15, I would have rolled my eyes, put up a massive defensive wall, and tuned the entire program out.
Oh, completely.
Right. Does bringing parents into the school environment not inherently trigger adolescent resistance?
Outwardly, yes, absolutely. You will absolutely see the push for independence, the eye rolling, the desire for distance.
Okay, so why does it work?
Because psychologically, teenagers remain deeply reliant on the secure base their parents provide. I mean, they are constantly pushing boundaries, but they're simultaneously checking over their shoulder to ensure the safety net is still intact.
That makes a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah. When parents actively participate in these interventions, it signals to the teenager that their well-being is a fundamental family priority, not just some, bureaucratic box the school is checking.
Well, it's perceived support.
Exactly. That perceived support operates below the surface of the teenage rebellion.
Wow. So the underlying support actually overrides the superficial annoyance.
It really does.
And the dual intervention studies in the review documented some fascinating psychological shifts that back that up, didn't they?
They did. For the adolescents, the data didn't just show a decrease in substance use.
Yeah, right. There's more to it.
The teenagers showed an increased ability to resist peer pressure and a measurably stronger capacity to simply say no. It basically fortified their social resilience.
And what about the parents?
The parents benefited too. They reported increased relationship satisfaction. And on the flip side, the teens reported a significantly higher perception of parental involvement.
Which is huge, because perceived parental involvement happens to be one of the most robust protective factors we have against adolescent substance use.
Exactly. When the family unit is aligned on the risks, the vocabulary, the rules, the teenager's internal risk calculus fundamentally changes.
Right. They aren't just rebelling against a faceless school authority anymore, or a random health teacher.
No, they're navigating expectations set by the very people they rely on most for their core emotional security.
But practically, translating that psychological theory into a gymnasium full of real families seems like a logistical nightmare.
Oh, it's definitely a challenge.
How do schools practically manufacture that aligned family unit?
Right.
You can't just mandate that a parent and a teenager suddenly have a highly communicative, supportive relationship about something as heavy as methamphetamine.
You can't force it, no. But the review highlights specific program structures that successfully bridge that gap between theory and practice.
Okay, what do those look like?
Well, one standout model pairs 2 distinct programs running concurrently. You have Families Preparing the New Generation, or the FPNG program.
And that one is applied directly to the parents, right?
Correct. And alongside that, the adolescents go through a 10-week program called Keeping It Real, or KIR.
Keeping it real.
Yeah.
Okay, so the teenagers are getting that 10-week skill-building harm reduction curriculum we discussed earlier. Learning the neuroscience, the peer pressure de-escalation tactics.
Right.
But what are the parents actually doing in the FPNG sessions to parallel that?
They're learning how to actively reinforce that exact framework in the home environment.
Oh, so they're on the same page.
literally the same page. If the teenager is learning specific strategies to de-escalate peer pressure at school, the parent is learning how to role-play those exact scenarios at the dinner table.
Without sounding judgmental or overbearing, hopefully.
Exactly, that's the key. It aligns the family vocabulary. And the longitudinal data on this type of sustained structural involvement is striking.
I was looking at the Resilient Families program in Australia. That one stood out to me.
Yes. That was a comprehensive 3-year longitudinal intervention designed specifically to reduce the frequency of drinking among adolescents who consume high amounts of alcohol.
But wait, sustaining any behavioral intervention for 3 full years with teenagers?
Yeah.
That is a massive undertaking.
It's huge.
What was the payoff for that level of structural commitment?
The payoff was significant. The program yielded a major decrease in binge drinking rates across the cohort. But honestly, more importantly, it successfully delayed the age at which adolescents initiated alcohol use.
Okay, why is the delay so important?
Because delaying initiation until after age 15 massively reduces the statistical likelihood of developing a long-term substance dependency in adulthood.
Back to the sports car. The longer that prefrontal cortex has to develop before encountering the substance, the better the lifetime outcomes.
Bingo.
We're also seeing interventions that look past the immediate family unit and focus on the wider ecosystem the teenager lives in.
Right, the community level.
Yeah, the sources dive into the Adolescent Community Reinforcement Approach, or ACRA, and Student Assistance Programs, SAPs.
Both fantastic models.
And ACRA focuses on rearranging environmental contingencies to make substance use less rewarding. It sounds like instead of just giving the kid an umbrella to handle the rain, their individual coping skills, they're teaching the parents in the community how to actually fix the roof by changing the environment itself.
That's a perfect way to put it. You have to treat the ecosystem, not just the individual, in a vacuum.
And within that ecosystem, the communication style of the professionals completely shifts to accommodate the adolescent mindset.
It has to. The student assistance programs heavily utilize motivational interviewing techniques to navigate the inherent resistance we talked about earlier.
Yeah, the sources mentioned 2 highly specific techniques within motivational interviewing: rolling with resistance and supporting self-efficacy.
Yes, those are foundational.
But how does rolling with resistance actually play out in a session with a defensive, frustrated teenager?
Well, imagine a teenager who is already engaging in high-risk behaviors sitting in a counselor's office.
Okay, they probably don't want to be there.
They definitely don't. And if the counselor argues, lectures, or threatens punishment, the teenager immediately shuts down. Or they fight back.
Naturally.
Rolling with resistance means the counselor acknowledges the pushback without fighting it. So if the teen says, "Everyone drinks, it's not a big deal," the counselor might respond, "You're right that a lot of people your age drink. How has it been affecting your weekend plans?"
Oh, wow. So you use the teenager's own momentum to help them identify their own problems.
Exactly. And then they develop their own solutions. It removes the friction from the conversation entirely.
Because you aren't giving them anything solid to rebel against, which
Yeah.
forces them to actually evaluate their own choices.
Precisely.
And then supporting self-efficacy comes in to build their belief that change is practically possible.
Yes.
I mean, if a kid feels entirely hopeless about their future or believes their environment will never improve, they have no incentive to stop taking risks.
Right. Why bother trying if it's hopeless?
Exactly. You have to give the sports car driver the keys, the manual, and a supportive pit crew instead of just screaming at them from the sidelines.
Building that agency is the ultimate goal of these programs. However, as educational researchers, we have to put on our analytical lenses before declaring this a completely solved problem.
Yes. The data reality check.
The parallel tracks, the motivational interviewing, the delayed initiation rates, these outcomes sound incredibly hopeful on paper, but we have to look under the hood of the data to see how solid this proof actually is.
Yeah, the methodology of the Chelleck and Ulasoy review acts as a massive reality check on the state of current research. I mean, they started by evaluating over 4,000 initial studies related to this topic, 4,421 to be exact.
It's a huge tool.
And out of all of those thousands of papers, only 7 met the rigorous criteria to actually be included in the final review.
Only 7. That aggressive filtration process exposes a critical weakness in the broader field of educational research.
What were they filtering out?
Well, over 2,000 studies were eliminated immediately simply because they weren't school-based.
Okay, that makes sense.
And hundreds more were dropped for being purely qualitative mere case studies or failing to involve both parents and adolescents in the intervention. They demanded rigorous empirical evidence, and very few studies met that necessary bar.
But even within those final 7 gold standard studies, the researchers conducted a strict risk of biases assessment.
They did.
And the results of these dual interventions are highly promising. But half of the risk of bias assessments in these final studies were graded as ambiguous.
Ambiguous, yes.
The sources dive into some dense statistical concepts here, specifically selection biases and allocation concealment. Could you break those down?
Sure. So selection bias examines exactly how participants were chosen for the experimental group versus the control group.
Right.
Allocation concealment takes it a step further and asks whether the researchers or the practitioners knew which kids were getting the new, highly funded intervention and which were just getting the standard health class curriculum.
Right, because if a researcher consciously or subconsciously places the highly motivated kids, the ones who already have deeply involved parents, into the experimental group, your data will look fantastic. But it's fundamentally flawed.
Exactly. You've just proven that motivated people succeed, not that your specific program works.
And the sources note some studies use computer randomization, which is a great low-risk method.
Yeah.
But others vaguely stated participants were randomly assigned without explaining the mechanism.
And that lands them squarely in that uncertain risk category. We also have to account for performance bias.
What's that?
Well, blinding participants in behavioral therapy is inherently difficult, if not entirely impossible. I mean, in a clinical medical trial, you administer a placebo, and the patient genuinely doesn't know if they received the active drug.
Right. But you can't hide from a parent that they're attending a 10-week intensive parenting class in the school cafeteria.
No, you really can't.
You can't just slip a communication workshop into their morning coffee. The parents and the teenagers know they are the subject of an intervention.
Yes, they are fully aware.
So if a study has an ambiguous risk of bias, because we can't blind a parenting class, why should we trust these findings at all? I mean, they might just be reporting better relationship outcomes because they know they're supposed to be doing better. It's the placebo effect applied to family dynamics. Does that not compromise the core conclusion of the entire review?
That's a highly valid critique. The lack of blinding is an issue. But it doesn't mean we discard the findings entirely.
Why not?
Because the underlying psychological mechanism remains sound. We see consistent, positive outcomes across drastically different cultural and socioeconomic contexts, from Taiwan to Mexico to Australia.
Oh, I see. If it only worked in one specific culture, it would be suspicious.
Exactly. If the programs only worked in one highly specific demographic, the bias would be fatal to the conclusion. But they work everywhere. The ambiguous bias ratings simply highlight a critical need for the scientific community to tighten its experimental methods.
Right. We need to be cautiously optimistic while demanding better experimental designs.
Precisely. We need larger sample sizes, transparent randomization protocols, and much longer follow-up periods to definitively measure the magnitude of the effect and entirely rule out external variables.
Okay, let's look at the big picture for you, the listener. The massive potential here lies in shifting school-based substance interventions from that outdated, student-only gymnasium model to a modern, family-inclusive framework.
That's the main takeaway.
By bringing parents into the equation and focusing on harm reduction and environmental changes, we aren't just telling kids to say no. We're actively helping them build the neurological and social brakes for that sports car to navigate severe, cascading threats like alcohol and methamphetamine.
The current data provides a deeply hopeful roadmap for educators and parents alike. It demonstrates that despite the outward challenges of adolescence, teenagers fundamentally need and heavily benefit from the structural support of their parents working in tandem with the school system.
And it leaves us with a broader question to mull over. We're asking schools to do so much more than teach math and history these days.
So much more.
If schools are becoming the central hub, not just for adolescent education, but for family socialization, community reinforcement, and complex public health interventions, how does that fundamentally change our definition of what a school's responsibility is in a modern community?
It's a massive shift in how we view the role of education.
It really is. The next time you picture a school assembly, maybe don't just picture the kids on the bleachers. Picture the parents sitting right there with them, learning how to fix the roof together. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.